I'm Mathieu from ShapeDiver, and today I'll introduce the SelectionInput component. This component is a new component in the ShapeDiver plugin, one of the new input components, and it allows to define geometry in the scene that users of the apps can select and then use the selection to drive the online app. So in my case, I just kept it simple here. I have 3 objects in my scene and I have 1 slider related to each of these objects. And what I'd like to do is 2 things. I'd like to make each of these objects selectable and then use it to drive the geometry. In my case, I'll use my test data here to show you. I'd just like to draw a simple boundary around the object selected. And the second thing is that I'd like to only show the slider that relates to the object I selected in my scene. Of course, in my case, I only have 3 objects and 1 slider per object, so it's not so much. But imagine a big scene with tons of objects and a lot of contextual parameters for each object. The selection here, driving the UI through the selection input, might help make this app much leaner, much cleaner, and much more user-friendly. Right, so I'll start with those objects and those sliders here, so the basic algorithm. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that all my objects are displayed in the scene on the online viewer. And to do that, I'll use the display component, so that's pretty classic now if you've seen a few videos. And I'll give it a name, boxes, right? And I'll also make sure that each of the objects in my display component has a name attribute set, right? So here I have my box 1, box 2, box 3. And that makes my objects in the display component identifiable. We've already seen in the past, for example, in the points input component, how we can use this naming scheme and the name of the component dot the attribute to be able to identify objects. In our case, we'll use this in the selection input component to define which of the objects in the scene the users should be able to select, in other words, which object they should be able to click on. Right, so here, for example, if I just put boxes, the name of my complete input component, then the entirety of the input component will be selectable at once, right? But here I can use the wildcards, so dot star, to specify that each of the objects inside of the component, each of the objects that have a name attribute defined, can be individually selectable, right? And once this component is online, and once my users select something, the component will spit out the name of the selected objects. For example, if the second box is selected, it's going to spit out boxes.box2. And of course, then I can use this information like in my test data here, to further drive the algorithm. So now I have retrieved which object is selected in the viewer. And what I do first is parse the index, right? So I assigned indices to all my boxes, right? Box 1, box 2, box 3. Notice that also my sliders here have an index corresponding to the box they're assigned to. And here I'll do 2 things, right? The first thing is use this index to retrieve which of the boxes was selected and use it to drive then a boundary around this box, right? So here in my test data, I have the index 2. I use it to get the second box, right? So if I make it here, we'll see this corresponds to this one. And then I just simply use the bounding box to draw the boundary around the selected box. And the second thing I do here is that I build my app. I use the app builder components to build a very simple app with just 1 write container and 1 parameter widget. This parameter widget has at least always the select box input, which is the name of my selection input. And then it shows 1 additional parameter, the height parameter corresponding to the box that is selected, right? So in my case, box 2 is selected, I show the height 2 parameter. If no box is selected, then there's no additional parameter. Right, so here Once I do that, I can upload this definition online, and we can quickly see what it looks like in the App Builder. As you can see, by default, I have no object selected. That's because that's my default here. If I by default, I could specify one selection, but I don't have one. And also, I specified the minimum allowable objects to be selected is 0. That means that no object needs to be selected. The maximum is 1, so I let my users only select one object at a time. Okay, so here, if I activate the selection, then I can see that in effect, my 3 objects are selectable, and I can select one, right, and confirm. And once I select this one corresponds to the box 3 name attribute. I can see here that I show my height parameter corresponding to this box, and I can use it to drive this geometry. Then I can select another one. I'm showing height 2, update, and that's it. And since I allow users to select no objects, I can also empty the selection completely and go back to a state where none of it is selected, no boundary is shown in the scene. Alright, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. As always, you can find this definition and a lot more examples on our tutorial center. There's also our forum if you have any questions, and I hope to see you next time for the next tutorial video. Thank you. Bye-bye.